Welcome back to the sweatshop, boys and girls. Today we are doing a rear bearing on this 2006 Subaru Outback. So your first thing is going to be to put the car up in the air. Once you get it up in the air, make sure it is secure. Once it is, you're going to need to check and see which bearing it is. Two things you can do. You can listen to it while you road test it. If you can't determine which one it is, sometimes your car will have play, or the bearing that's bad will develop play. So what you can do is shake it like this. Maybe a bit hard to see on camera, but this one is definitely our bad bearing. Once you have singled out the bearing that is bad, your next step is to take the wheel off. With your wheel out of the way, your next step is to remove your caliper. These are 14mm bolts. Just crack them loose. Judging by what I just did, it's not the best technique. You should probably use a ratchet so that you don't damage your hands, but being a grease monkey, yeah. If you've recently done your brakes, your caliper should slide right off. If you haven't done it, it may be seized. What you want to do is stick a flat screwdriver in between the caliper and the pad or rotor and just pry it back so that you relieve the tension on the caliper. Obviously I did a good job, that's why it came off well. Don't ask the customer about the noises that he hears. That's actually the hardware, not my fault. Caliper out of the way, remove the pads. So our next step here is to pull the rear caliper bracket off. These ones here can be a real test of your patience from Subaru. With the Outback Legacy, they all have the same sort of setup. You'll need a 3-inch extension, 14mm on a 3/8 ratchet to pull off the top one, and then a 6-inch extension for the bottom. Go ahead, crank them loose. Ugh, fuck. The other thing that likes to happen in the Rust Belt area of the world is they love to rot away. And when they do rot away, if these things are rounded off where they sit, God help you, my friend. It's going to suck. Your life will become something that you will probably want to end relatively quickly. So best advice I can give you is if your bolts are rounded off, go ahead and replace them with new ones or replace them with ones that are good. Trying to remove these bolts when they are rounded is a real pain and is something that no one ever wants to do. So don't give yourself that headache. Either replace them or get good used ones. Get the bottom one. Jesus. If you're a professional technician, power tools are your friends. Yay! With all of that fun stuff out of the way, you can now yank on your rotor. Oh, come on, dude. Oh, come on! Usually they should come off relatively easy. It's not happening today. So what you want to do is just yank on it a bit more. I think mine will come off. If not, there are 2 bolt holes here. You can use a M8 by 125 pitch bolt, thread it down in there, and it will press against your hub and pull the rotor off. We're just going to use pure aggression to yank this thing off. It's not working. Okay. Fuck it, we're gonna get those bolts. So if your rotor is stuck and you're going to be reusing it, what you don't want to do is damage it. So what you can do is employ the use of the correct size bolts in order to put pressure on your hub and pull the rotor away from it. Now what you'll need to do is hit it with something to shock your shoes in here and get them to fall away from the rotor. If your rotor is good, use one of these, a mallet. If it's bad, beat it with the biggest steel hammer that you have. It is advised that you beat it like it owes you money. Somehow that tends to work better. It is a slow process. You do not want to wrench down on these things. It's not a good idea. Just wind it in like that and hammer. If for whatever reason yours will not come off, what you want to do is get to the adjustment. I'm not even sure where the adjustment is on this. I can't remember. It's definitely on the back of the spindle. There'll be a little rubber place and you can adjust this guy here. And there you go. One rotor down and the bearing to go. That doesn't really make sense, but whatever. You understand what I mean. Now get your favorite 32mm socket and hammer off the axle nut. Then push it through to make sure that it's loose. Luckily, ours is loose, which is nice. If yours isn't, what you can do is take a tapered punch and smash this thing here to make sure it comes loose. Sometimes in the rust belt, it can take quite a bit of smashing. You may even have to resort to the use of heat. Good luck if you do. Our next step is going to be to pull these bolts out here in the front and in the back. They are 14mm bolts and they are a bit tight to get to. What I like to do is use a 4-inch half-inch extension and a 14mm shallow or a flex socket. Whatever you got to do to get them out, that's what you have to do with an impact gun. Just smash them out of there. Just before you go ahead and fire them off, make sure that you get the socket on all the way, because much like the bolts for the caliper bracket, if you have to try and remove them with a damaged bolt remover, you're going to cry. 1, 2, oh fuck you, number 3. We're going to use a flex for the bolts in the front because it's kind of hard to get to. What I like to do is use one with a locking pin, because these things can be widowmakers. They like to fling the sockets usually at your head or hand, which really sucks. 3 and 4. Now, there are a number of different ways that you can peel this bearing off of the car. You can get a slide hammer and attach it to the hub over here, which is not the easiest thing to do and usually can be quite the task in terms of trying to pull it off of the vehicle. What I like to do is get a bolt that is considerably longer than the bolt that we pulled out. We thread it in and then we beat the head of the bolt. You beat it just a bit until you get the bearing to move. Once the bearing moves a little bit, you're going to take that same bolt out and put it on the opposite side on the opposing hole. With the bolt, you want to make sure that you thread it in so that you cover all of the actual thread section on the hub. That way you're not leaving any gap and you're not getting just a couple of threads in. That way you won't damage it when you bash it. Now get the biggest and heaviest hammer that you have that will fit between the sway bar link and the CV shaft. Make sure you don't collide with either of them, because then you'll be replacing more parts. Begin smashing. Okay, that's a bad position. I'm going to end up smashing the CV shaft, so we're going to get a ginormous punch. With your ginormous punch, begin smashing. Oh, fuck. Make sure you wear eyeglasses, because all the shit that falls from the car into your eyes won't be fun. After a couple of smashes, visually check to see if the bearing has moved. If it has, you can switch holes. That sounds fucking weird. The process is basically you trying to smash this thing until it starts to move. When it does start to move, then alternate between holes until you get it all the way out. Oh, looks like we had success. Now what you want to do is check to make sure it's all loose. Whoa, shit, the whole assembly wants to fall out there. So, as you can see, we have it loose. What you want to do is not push it upwards drastically, because you do have an ABS sensor that is sticking out up in this region. And then slide the bearing off of the backing plate, this guy here, and begin cleaning stuff up to receive the new bearing. Our next step is to separate our backing plate from the bearing. Of course, in the north here, the rust tight is holding it hostage. So what we need to do is gently bang it around on the solid parts of the backing plate as best you can to separate it. Push it back like so, and then go ahead and remove the bolt that is holding this assembly captive to the spindle. And then you can start prepping to put in your new bearing. Wiggle your bearing off. So with your bearing out of the way, this backing plate is going to want to fall out of the way. Just move it out of the way, because once you do, you will see there is a bunch of rust here that you need to clean up. You also need to clean up the rust in this cavity here, but that black little thing there is very expensive and a pain in the ass. So do not hit it, collide with it. Try your absolute best not to damage it. It is your ABS sensor that I couldn't show you earlier because the sway bar link was in the way. Best thing I can tell you, push the CV back and out of the way just a bit. What you're going to do is use a file or any method that you can to get rid of all this crud. Once you get rid of the crud, what you want to do is paint it with a light coating of spray paint. It can be any color you like, as long as it covers the metal and you don't have any rust reoccurring. It's going to make your life considerably easier if you have to attempt this job again. Remember, the key to success here is wearing your eye protection, ear protection, and lung protection. So what we have seen is someone has attempted this job before and they went at the face of the bearing surface or the mating surface here with a aggressive grinding disc or grinder. Don't do that. What you want to do is just take away the rust, not the actual material. You should be able to see the machine marks, hopefully. If not necessarily a big deal. Just make sure you get a nice coat of paint on it. And the next step here for cleaning the bore is for us to use a carbide bit. If you're going to use one of these at home or a Dremel, whatever it is that you use to clean this, whether it be a filer, hopes and prayers, what you want to do is make sure you do not collide or come into contact with the ABS sensor, because if you do, it will suck. So what I like to do after you get the surface all prepped and nice for paint is to use some well-through zinc primer. If you're going to use this stuff, remember to shake well. Once you shake it well, try not to get any paint on the CV shaft or on the ABS sensor. Now the main part of the CV shaft that you're trying to miss is this portion here. If you get it on the silver portion, it doesn't really matter. Of course, most people and mechanics don't really do this. The reason why is because it costs them money and it's kind of overkill. It's not a requirement. It's just because they don't care. But if I'm going to have to do this job again, I want to make sure I don't have a pain in the ass when I do it the next time. Once you let the paint dry, what you're going to do now is make sure that your bolts are coated with a good layer of anti-seize. Then your next step is to make sure that you have cleaned up the back of your backing plate. Spray paint it so that it doesn't rust as well. Make sure the bolts are protruding through the spindle, and then put your backing plate back into place. This can be sometimes a frustrating process because your bolts want to do that and go into the spindle, exactly where you don't want them to go. With your bolts holding up your backing plate, what you want to do is get your bearing, but before you put it on, you can put a thin layer of grease right here on the lip of the bearing. Just a really thin layer. You don't want to have any grease in this area. It is a sealed unit, so if you put grease in there, it'll help grind away your actual seal and wreck your bearing prematurely. So don't do that. Also, make sure for whatever reason you don't shove this thing in there and somehow come into contact with your ABS sensor. Now all you got to do is just let it rest on the actual CV shaft, slide it in, and then get a 14 mil with an extension and then thread the bolts into the bearing. So what you want to do is basically hold it all together as close as you can while turning the bolt. Thread them in by hand. Do not use power tools because in this situation, they can quickly become your enemy. Once you get all the bolts threaded in by hand, then you can go ahead and slowly run them up either with a ratchet or an impact driver. Do not run them up if they are extremely tight. You are cross-threading the thread on the bolt and ruining your life. And now you can torque them. Torque the bolts to 48 foot-pounds. We're going to torque them to 50 because why not just round up, right? Yeah, that's that. Put your axle nut back. Then torque it to 177 foot-pounds. Don't torque the bolt right now. What you're going to do is wait till you get the brakes on. You can apply the emergency brake or have a friend step on the brake pedal and then go ahead and torque the nut to 177 foot-pounds. Now what we're going to do before we install our brake rotor is give this guy a nice healthy coat of white lithium grease. You can also use anti-seize. Copper type is what I like to use. You can use the aluminum type as well. Now remember, for proper application, shake well. You should also wear a mask or be outdoors when applying this stuff because it's quite odorous. Now slap your rotor back on. Don't just leave the rotor, check it by rotating it to make sure that it is free and not binding up on your shoes that were helping it stay on the vehicle in the first part of this video when we tried to remove this little bastard. Put your caliper bracket back into the car. Don't drop the bolt like I did. This is probably a useless shot because my hand is all that you can see, boys and girls, so sorry about that. Thread it in by hand and of course then get your power tool and run it up all the way. Go ahead and torque your caliper bracket bolts to 40 foot-pounds. I really love this design. There's this YouTube channel I really like. It's called Bad Obsession Motorsports. This guy's built a four-wheel drive Mini. Besides that, man, the craftsmanship. Ugh. Go ahead, place your pads back in place as well as your caliper and then torque the bolts to 20 foot-pounds. Now, what you want to do is get a friend to step on the brake, apply the handbrake so you could torque the axle nut to 177 foot-pounds. Luckily today, boys and girls, I have a friend with me in the shop to help me so that I can torque this thing. What you want them to do is apply the handbrake as well as your regular service brakes. Just get them to step on them as hard as they can and then go ahead and torque it. And there you go, boys and girls, 177 foot-pounds later, you are good to go. You can now go ahead and put your wheel back on. Before you go ahead and put your wheel back on, take a punch and a hammer and stake the nut. Remember just to hit the punch and not your hand. With your wheel back on, go ahead and tighten them up. Make sure you catch these bolts by hand before you try to run them up with a gun. Push the wheel back into the spindle. Make sure that it is sitting on the center of the hub and fire the bolts home. Then you can go ahead and torque your wheels. The recommended torque spec is, I believe, 74 to 89 foot-pounds. I torque all my Subarus to 100. Also, before you put the wheel on, don't forget to put some anti-seize or white lithium grease. Well, boys and girls, your final step is to go ahead, take this thing for a test drive and make sure you got the right wheel bearing. If you didn't, maybe I'll show you how to do front wheel bearings. That's all she wrote for the Outback. If you liked the video, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss one of my new videos. And as always, thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one. It's a lot of fucking rambling.
No, it's good.
2001 all the way up to like 2011 was a real pain in the ass to get the back caliper off. Let's not put that in there. Because trying to get that head off with a removal tool that has very little space will make you want to hang from the top of your building. That's too gory. Trying to remove this with a bolt removal, trying to remove this with a nut removal tool. Oh God. Trying to remove these bolts off of the car when they are rounded off with a rounded fucking, oh my God. Trying to remove these oh God, man. God damn it. It's gonna be one of those days.
No problem.
And there you go. With a luckily, ours is loose. Now all we have to do is, I don't know what the fuck I was going with that. A center punch, not, fuck. I know it looks like rust, but they're, what the fuck am I saying? Considerably longer than the bolts. Why did it glitch there? Did you see that shit?
Yeah, I did.
But you beat it enough. The biggest, most favorite hammer that you have, That makes no fucking sense. Now get the biggest hammer that you have that will fit in that section. God damn it. The process is basically to keep on smashing until you get movement and then alternate between holes. Now is the perfect time to test it. Well, it's kind of hard to hear, but there is a grumble there. And obviously, it's loose, which you can't see on camera. This segment is brought to you by uselessness. Okay, boys and girls, we'll see you in the next one. An issue, we're going to cause an issue. As long as you torque the bolts right and use some, you know, no one's going to understand this shit. Fuck it. No, don't bother. Oh, come on. Did I get it that way? Oh, yeah, it's tight. Now I look like an asshole on camera. Give me back my socket, you fucker. Why aren't you making the fucking oh, it's off. You fucking kidding me? It's way over fucking 40 now. Let's see how much it is. It's a 51. That's close enough. Fuck. Go ahead and torque this fucking bitch now. Ah, can't swear, Jimmy. You want that monetization money. Yeah, man. Make the sound. Oh, fuck. We're not even close. Make the sound. Luckily. So, I didn't think about what else I was going to say after that. Before you go ahead and put your wheel back on. Yeah, that's what they call it, Jimmy. That's that for the Outback. We're going to take it for a test drive now and make sure it's all good. What the fuck? Alternate between holes.